Hey friend, Shereese here, and in today's episode, Data is acting super sus. Troi gets attacked by an energy being again, and we ask the question, who else wants a piece of Worf? Stay tuned. Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today we're talking Season 4, Episode 14, entitled Clues. This episode was written by Joe Minoski and Bruce D. Arthurs and directed by Les Landau. While en route to investigate a mysterious planet, the entire crew, with the exception of Data, is rendered unconscious by an apparent wormhole. After they revive, Data explains that they were unconscious for only 30 seconds, but a variety of clues discovered around the ship seem to indicate that he is lying.
Bum, bum, bum. How fun is this episode?
Ugh. I feel like I'm saying this for a lot of episodes in season 3 and 4, but this really is one of my favorites. I feel like I've said that for a lot of episodes, and I have a lot of different reasons, but this is an episode to me that I have looked forward to since we decided to do this podcast. It's one that I keep returning to time and time again. It stands up. I mean, I don't know if like Justice or Code of Honor or, mishap at, the Outpost, stood up, when it was aired, but those season ones don't stand up anymore. And this one does. It's just as good. It's so freaking good. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Ditto. Everything you just said. Ditto, ditto, ditto. I was really excited to go through this one. This is kind of a mystery. And you know what? It reminds me of the episode we had a little while ago where Beverly had a mystery on her hands. And it was kind of like we're figuring out that she's trapped inside a warp bubble, but we wouldn't have figured that out until the very, very end when she's like, oh my gosh, it's a warp bubble. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that where you're like, is Data lying? Data can't be lying. Data doesn't lie, but Data could lie if he wanted to lie. And then you're like, wait a minute. Is he doing something shady? Is he trying to hurt everybody? He's not trying to hurt everybody. It's just so fun. I love the mystery episodes. So I was really excited about this one.
Yeah, this one is so much fun. It really is. I mean, entitled Clues, for a reason. It's just lovely. It's the kind of mystery that we get to discover along with the crew, as viewers, where we don't know the identity of the murderer. We have to kind of solve this as things go. And it's just delicious. I'm going to tell you, this is the first episode where we get to finally meet Nurse Ogawa.
She actually was on the show before, but this is the first time she gets a name. And I did a whole deep dive on Nurse Ogawa because I was like, she's here again. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad to see her.
Yes.
And so then I did a whole deep dive of when did I see her before and all this stuff. So we'll get into some Nurse Ogawa.
Can't wait to that.
Deliciousness in not too long because we get sick bay pretty early in the episode. But I just want to say I love the cold open. I love how this episode started with this slice of life all throughout the ship. Because usually downtime, whenever we see them have downtime, is when the ship is in some kind of station or has come to some planet and they're just doing some weird stuff on a planet. But here, this is how do people relax on the actual ship? I mean, they live on this ship. What do they do in their downtime? So we see this kind of gym. And I think this is our first time seeing the Klingon Tai Chi. Is this our first time or our second time?
Yes, this is the first time ever seeing Worf's Mokbara class, which is Tai Chi. Yeah.
It's so great.
I'm minoring in Klingon in college right now.
Nice. Well, good luck with that. I see a lot of options in your future with that minor.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get straight in my class. So possibly the stupidest thing I've ever said in my life. Anyway.
I love everything about that. So I was really excited about this gym scene. I was like, it's our first time. And it just looks cool. And you see the main cast because they're the most important people, but you also see others. And you're like, there's 1,000 people on the ship. It's nice to sprinkle in some of those 1,000 just to remind us that other people exist on the ship. Then we get this kind of little sneak peek into sick bay. And we see the little orbs. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want
Beverly with a new shorter do is doing some orbs. And then it's Dixon Hill.
Yes. This is, and I didn't realize this till the very end, but we only get Guinan in this scene alone. She's only in the holodeck at the beginning of the episode.
Right.
And we don't see her face for the whole rest of the episode. And
you're
you know
totally
what?
Right.
It's worth it. Loved seeing her so much.
Guinan in 1940s outfit. I'm there for it. I love that she's there with the express interest to just play with Picard. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Now, she comes in and, you know, Dixon Hill is being held at gunpoint by some guy, and then somebody else shoots through the window and kills him, which I'm like, false. Because the first time we saw Dixon Hill, he was looking out the window and he was on like the third story.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, how did they shoot into the window, but from the ground, but also the blinds are closed?
Projectile trajectory, I'm going to say
Did they
false.
have sniper rifles in 1940s, maybe, or 20s, or whenever they were supposed to be? I don't know.
It's supposed to be like 1930s-ish. They did have sniper rifles then, but you don't shoot up from the ground floor to a third story window and hit a dude in the torso. That's not a thing. So I mean, it's just story continuity.
The physics was a little bit off.
But you know what? I did think when that guy dropped dead, I was like, Wayland's probably like, told ya, it sucks. Yeah, okay.
Why y'all keep playing this game? Like, this is just not a good one to be in the holodeck.
Yes. And he's telling Guinan, he's like, it's a mystery. We have to solve the clues. Like, and I just love the foreshadowing of this whole thing.
You know what? And I never put that together, 2 and 2 together, until a few episodes ago when you said, hey, whenever they have a holodeck opening, there's always some very clear lead in to this is what the episode's going to be about. And I've been watching this show for over 30 years. Never noticed that until you said it. So as soon as he said, we have to figure out the clues, I was like, clues, that's the name of the episode. I see what you did there. I see what you did.
I love that you're putting 2 and 2 together.
I was looking at the clues and I was piecing them and everything. And then we get Data calling into Picard using the phone, like calling the secretary.
Which I thought was delightful.
Because
delightful.
It was great. Because he said he didn't want to intrude. And I was like, well, either way you're interrupting. So I don't think it matters.
I think what he said was something along the lines of like, I thought that this intrusion was the least disruptive for the program that you're in or something. And I was like, I love that the receptionist took the call and then patched it through to Dixon. I was like,
I love that the receptionist was so confused. Picard? There's no Picard here.
Like, yeah. And he was so like, that's all right, Madeline. I'll take it in here. Yeah. I thought that this was great. Yeah.
Did you also notice that Data was pulling a Riker on the bridge?
Was he?
He was, but his crotch was facing away from the ensign sitting in the command chair. And I was like, Riker, please take note. When you lift your leg and display your crotch, it should be away from the face of the nearest person. So, yeah.
I did see something very funny, actually. Some meme that someone generated that was like Iron Man walking away from an explosion, and Iron Man, it said a high back chair, and the explosion said Riker's crotch. It's too perfect. I love these kind of jokes. They just tickle my funny bone totally. Now, what Data's actually calling in to say is that they're in the T-Tori system. There seems to be something that appears to be M-class like, and if Picard wanted to kind of come and investigate, and Picard's like, ooh, that I do want to investigate. I'll be right up. So he pops up to the bridge, and this wormhole seems to like kind of come out of nowhere and surrounds the ship. And it immediately pans to Data, who looks around to find everybody unconscious. And I think this is at least a 3 on the bum scale, because credits haven't even run yet. So everybody's out cold except for Data, and then credits start. And I was like, oh my God, like we have just been presented with one hell of a mystery, and I'm so excited about it.
I agree. And not only that, like, not only was this such a great opener for all the reasons we said, the slice of life, the true mystery, you know, everyone's unconscious but Data, but also the episode delivers. It satisfies the curiosity raised by this mystery. It's not like this is the best part of the episode, and then it's downhill from here and it ends up being some like Romulan spy who was pretending to be a Vulcan. It's not something stupid like that.
Oh, totally. They really, really do. Now, the stun effect on the wormhole knocked everybody out for about 30 seconds. So everybody starts to revive, and Dr. Crusher comes up to the bridge to get a status report. And she's like, what happened? I mean, I'm getting like kind of calls from all over the ship. Everybody, you know, cuts and scrapes and bumped elbows and things like that. And Picard does say, you know, it seems that we passed through this somewhat unstable wormhole. We were out for 30 seconds or so. You know, keep me posted if there's any major injuries or whatever. And poor Counselor Troi, did you notice this? She's like feeling like
I did.
Fuzzy and kind of dizzy, and she's rubbing her head and she's like, oh. Now, the wormhole did kick them out 0.54 parsecs away from their original location. And Picard is like, hey, before the wormhole, weren't we looking at like a class M planet that like the probe had like kind of come back with, or sensors had come back with? And Data's like, ooh, I advise not going through the wormhole again. Like, let's launch a probe. Like, it seems very,
let's not even go into that. Let's not even go into that area of space because the wormhole is unstable and it's kind of like popping up all over the place. So let's send a probe. So in case that gets sucked in wherever, we still get the information and no harm, no foul on us. And Picard's like, great idea. Make it so.
Yeah. Launch that probe and off we go. Now, the next thing we see is Chief O'Brien has twisted his elbow. So he's, in sick bay. And this is the first time we see Nurse Ogawa. And she's only given her first name Alyssa. And it's not until Cause and Effect, which we see later, I think this season, that we find out her last name is Ogawa. Now, you did a deep dive on Nurse Ogawa. I would love to hear this.
So this is actually our second time seeing her. She appeared first in Future Imperfect, and that was the episode where Riker was in the future 16 years, and she was in sick bay helping Beverly. But in that scene, in that episode, she didn't have a name. She was just Nurse. So interesting. And in the deep dive, which I got from Memory Alpha, which has all the good stuff.
I love Memory Alpha. They rock.
Thank you, nerds, for creating
Memory
that.
Alpha.
Yes, because it's a lifesaver. And it really is. It's like Wikipedia. I just believe everything on there. Because everything has it's marked to all the original data points and stuff. I love it. You guys take Wikipedia up another notch with your nerddom. But yeah, so she was in that episode and she was just called Nurse, and she didn't think she would be called back for any future episodes. Then she got called back on this episode and they gave her a first name. And then it was later on, like you said, in Cause and Effect, where they actually give her a last name, and she shows up a couple of times. She becomes a bigger character, kind of more towards season 6 and 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fact that I feel like she's a staple member of the sick bay, and this is literally the second time we've seen her, and the first time she even gets a name, and it's season 4. It's like, how did that happen? I feel like she's been in.
I could have sworn she's been there since like season 2 or 3.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you for the deep dive. You know what I love is the Future Imperfect. When Riker flashed forward 16 years, as we just watched that episode not long ago, remember that was completely like a projection of like that little boy's like imagination. So he basically like imagined a nurse that we'd never seen before. And she was basically like a holodeck character. And now she's actually real, which I think is like a little minuet come to life. Like, that's so great. Yeah. I do love her in that de-evolution episode too, because I think she's so pregnant. Great. She's having babies or whatever. They're super cool. Really, really love Nurse Ogawa. She's just the kind of person I would want to treat my like tennis elbow or whatever after I've been going a little too hard at the holodeck or
100%. And I love that we have another Asian cast member. Whoop, whoop, diversity.
Yay, diversity.
And I love her temperament in this conversation between her and Beverly. So Beverly's like, she notices her cute little pods are now full of these really intricate pink, tiny little plants, which I have a feeling that if we were able to see close up, would have an incredible amount of detail. But I think all that detail was really lost on the screen because it's so small and it's bright pink and there's no contrast to show us all the little feathers and stuff. But I bet it's like a super detailed thing.
I'm telling you, as a marine biologist, I had to spend a semester studying phycology, which is not psychology, but phycology is the study of algae. So it was a whole semester on just algae, which was every bit as boring as it sounds, especially given the teacher was like this old codger who like didn't give any fucks at all anymore. He's like, I'm 2 years from retirement. I don't give a shit. But we did have to spend a whole bunch of time on, there's 3 main types of algae. For those of you who watch Star Trek and are really concerned about how many types of algae there are on our planet that we know of, there is red, green, and brown algae. And that looked so much like a very classic red algae that I was like, oh my God, I wonder if they got some sort of like a red coral algae or a something that would take the place, or some other kind of like reddish moss. I thought it was beautiful. I thought that moss was just gorgeous. Now, Beverly does find, she's like, what the hell? Because she had just set these spores to grow right before the wormhole engulfed them.
Right before their 30-second incapacitation.
Yes. And then finds that her moss spores show a full day's growth, which I was like, 4 inches of growth in one day is fucking ridiculous. That's moss grows that fast.
Exactly what I thought. I was like, moss though? Like what plant would grow that fast in 24 hours?
Bamboo, perhaps?
Perhaps. Yeah, maybe. But I was like,
Moss? No.
I think so, dear.
Moss takes like 11 years to grow like 2 inches. Like, it's,
let's
not a fast growing plant.
Let's leave this to Keiko because something's going on here with these plants. That's not.
This is where we actually want Keiko. Okay. Yeah. Like, get away from your sea cucumber and your sea buds or whatever the fuck you're eating and come and check out these spores because we've got a problem. So they've got a full day's growth, which like after a month, they just probably like take over the ship and destroy it. But they're like, wait a minute, something is wrong. You know, because Picard is like, Beverly, we've been out for 30 seconds. That was it. And she's like, I'm telling you, Jean-Luc. And I love that she uses the first name, you know.
When she's serious. That's her serious voice.
She's like, I'm telling you, Jean-Luc, this is a full day's growth.
And not just for one pod. She said if it was just 1 or 2 pods, it would just be a fluke. But it's for like 24 pods that are all different.
And she said the spores all came from like different areas on this planet that she like harvested these spores from. So it's like, ooh, she's like, if there was one that had maybe gone off, that would be fine. But every single one of them, this is strange.
Fishy.
Now, Data reads the planet. He gets the response back from the probe. And it shows this like non-M class planet. And Riker's like, wait a minute, but you said it might be an M class. And Data's like, it seems, you know,
Data's
perhaps
like, I don't think I said that. I don't recall ever saying that. I don't know what you're talking about.
He gives a very flimsy sort of rundown. He's like, it's possible that the sensors were reading like through the edge of the wormhole and got like some weird distorted something.
And there was like a planet on the other side of the wormhole. And that's what we were reading, but it was on the other side. It wasn't
But
really
also
there.
the light was in my eyes.
Yes,
so I'm not really sure.
There was a second planet coincidentally in the same location. That's also not
but what had happened was,
and Riker's like,
Did you see the very suspicious Riker look? He like furrowed his brow and he was like really shooting laser beams out of his eyes. But I was like, okay, all right. Data does keep saying, you know, because after Picard was like, look, we need to talk about the Moss. Data's like, well, I don't know what to tell you because we've been out for only 30 seconds. So they have an observation lounge meeting because, you know, they have nothing better to do with their time than talk about fucking moss growth. But they're like, something is going on. Now, here's where things start getting really suspicious. Data has too many answers too quickly. They're like, it's possible that this one doctor theorized that potentially, and this other thing, and Picard kind of sends him away on a wild goose chase mission.
It was the most beautiful send away. Like, I love that where Data's just like, got an answer for everything. And Picard's like, thank you very much, Data. That was really helpful. And I think Beverly goes to say, but wait a minute, that doesn't, and starts to do something. And Picard just cuts her off and is like, Data, you know, I promised someone that you would help them with this project. Is there any way you can go? Thanks so much. And Data's just like, sure. Like, why would he think anything about it? So as he leaves, like the moment the doors are like, and close, Picard's like, all right.
Does anybody believe him?
I think Data's lying. What about you guys? Hands. And everybody's like, yeah, something's off because he says, I've never known Data to lie, but this is nonsense. What he's saying.
This was nonsense. Yes. He did say like, hey, I promised Mr. Nelson that you would help him with some sort of thing done in engineering. Could you do that? And And as soon as Data was out the room, it was like, who believes him? Nobody. And that is a problem because Data shouldn't be able to tell a lie at all. So it's like,
well, he can choose to tell a lie, but he chooses to be truthful.
Right. But I mean, under orders, when, you know, if somebody says, you know, divulge all the information, you know, like he will do that because he's a fully signed up member of Starfleet. So it's like lying shouldn't be in his repertoire. Like something is wrong. And everybody kind of starts poking around, you know, the ship behind Data's back. And Dr. Crusher is like, hey, I know, I'll go see Miles because maybe Keiko's got some answers for my Moss and also transporty stuff.
I actually thought that was genius, that transporter idea, because they kept saying, and this kind of bugged me. So I'm glad that Beverly came up with a different solution. They kept saying, but the ship's chronometers, but the ship's clocks, but all the technology on the ship says it's been 30 seconds. And I was like, that's all technology. Like the Moss say it's been a day, but all the clocks have been turned to say it's been 30 seconds.
Yeah. Here in the United States, we change our clocks twice a year. It takes me a minute to do that. It's like, it's not hard.
It just felt like not totally bulletproof logic there. So I really appreciate when Beverly was like, I'll actually check how old people's cells are, like how people's cells have aged based on what information was in the transporter buffer versus what they're like now, and kind of compare and contrast, because that's going to give a more accurate reading. And still it's using technology. Like there's no way to get around using technology for something, But I just thought that was such a clever way to establish how much time has actually passed, because just looking at the clock doesn't seem like the way to go.
Doesn't really seem like it's going to be the bulletproof thing that you like, the bulletproof like backup rationale that you want it to be.
Look at the clock though. But the clock.
Now, Dr. Crusher does do this great thing where she's like, let me talk to Chief O'Brien because I want to see kind of if I could measure like cell membrane, something with whoever was the last person to use the transporter before the wormhole event. So she does find that the molecular level of our internal clock can be measured. Brilliant. And the last person who went through the transporter before the wormhole has an asynchronous turgid pressure with someone who would have been out for just 30 seconds. Now they kind of gloss over a little bit of that medical science, but I was like, cool. You know what? We're talking molecular cell level stuff. And internal clocks, I buy it. I buy the like medicine, the Trek medicine sort of explanation.
Yeah, it was good enough.
Yeah, it was good enough. It was great. And so Beverly is even more convinced now that like something is definitely wrong because this woman should have the same internal clock that we do, but measured against her last transporter buffer sequence, it's out of sync and it shouldn't be. So something is definitely weird and wrong now. And the what about the clocks kind of falls apart very, very quickly because Geordi is able to take a look at the ship's chronometer and realize that it has been altered.
Tampered with. Dun, dun,
yes.
dun.
Yes. And Picard is like, well, who could have done it? And Geordi's like, well, this is the bad news. Data and I are the only two people who could have done it. And I was like, oh shit. So it's like the plot thickens and also made me wonder, why can the chief engineer and the second in command be the only people to fuck with the ship's chronometer? Why doesn't Picard have that? Like, ability?
I mean, it made sense to me that Geordi can do it because he has that depth of knowledge of the ship. I would also think probably anyone on engineering or anyone high enough on engineering or anyone with enough experience in engineering could probably also do it. And then Data, just because he's an android, he can do anything. So if he looks at a schematic, he's like, got it. Right. I don't think it's more like,
that's true.
Because you're the second in command, you should know this. I think it was more like he's always with Geordi because they're friends. So he just like knows everything. That's kind of how I read that. And Geordi's like, I know for sure I didn't do it. I mean, I was only out for 30 seconds. And so they started thinking, which was an interesting line of thought, not that Data was lying, like purposefully trying to mislead, but that Data's systems had been corrupted, that there was some flaw in his program causing him to be untruthful or causing him to misremember facts or something like that. So even when Data's caught in a lie, because he's such an honest person, usually they're still continuing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And they're saying maybe that wormhole scrambled his systems or his circuits, and we need to figure out what's going on.
No, I absolutely am with you on that, where like I thought that was actually really, really cool because it became not that like we can't trust Data because he's lying to us, but like something might be wrong with him. So, when Data is faced with these very difficult questions that Picard has to ask him, he's not able to answer them. And so he concedes to an examination by Geordi. And this is always such a fan favorite moment for me when we get to see like the panels open on under Data's head and just like the little lights beeping. And I was like, oh my God, I want to cosplay as that one day. Cause it's just so recognizable, like instantly recognizable. And I love it.
It never looks like a prosthetic. To me, it always looks like it's in his head, and I don't know how they do it. It never looks like an extra piece they glued on top of Brent Spiner's head. It looks like it's inside his skull, and it's so cool.
So well done. It's so well done. Not only that, but when Geordi closes the flap or opens the flap, it makes a very tiny clicking sound. I don't know if you ever noticed that, and it's instantly recognizable to me. Like if I ever heard that clicking sound out of context, I'd be like, Data's head panel was just open somewhere. Like I would totally know. It's just, it's also like a very, it's kind of a weird way to say this. It's almost like an ASMR kind of a sound, like this tiny little click that like is very soothing. Like I would recognize it. Anyway, so Picard is like, okay, at this point, Geordi has reported like everything seems to be coming up fine with, Data's analysis. So it's clear that the crew has lost an entire day. Like they were probably unconscious for a whole day, and that Data is definitely covering something up. And Picard's like, okay, let's just sort of Tarantino this and work backwards and figure out when this all started and remembers that M-class planet was something they were investigating. So they're like, why don't we go back to the place where all this started, which I think is excellent deductive reasoning, by the way. Let's go back to where this problem started and let's start from there again. Now, at this point, Troi is being like overcome with dizziness. She's having a hard time. She was like rubbing her temples, you know, when they first woke up. Now she has this dizziness and it's a whole problem. So they're like, you know what, Deanna, you're completely useless in this episode up until this point. So why don't we go ahead and send you to your quarters? Let's go ahead and just have you go take a nippy nap. And Worf walks her to her quarters.
Which I appreciate that Picard sent Worf. Although I don't know if she needed the chief of security, but whatever. They only use 5 people to ever do anything on the ship.
It's obvious that Data's lying about something and we may need somebody to throw around the bridge. Worf, why don't you walk Counselor to her quarters where she already knows where she lives? But go ahead.
But I appreciate that because he did say maybe you should go to sickbay because you're feeling kind of swoony.
Yeah.
And maybe she should have gone to sickbay, but she was like, no, I really just want to go to my quarters and just lay down. I think I'll be fine. But I thought it was great to send Worf because she seemed like just like a little kind of out of it. And I would be concerned that she was going to safely make it to her quarters.
That's true. I mean, the girl could pass out somewhere. Yeah. In like a quiet corridor that nobody would see her. So yeah, she is walked to her quarters. And this is the first time that I've ever seen her walk arm in arm with Worf. And it kind of reminded me of that like the parallel future episode where she's like married to Worf sometime in like season 7, I think.
And I was spoiler alert, that episode's coming in. It's so good. Like I love that. It's so good.
And it's also like a parallel future. So it's not a real thing. So it's not a real spoiler and not a spoiler. But I thought this is the first time we see that like closer familiarity with Troi and Worf. And I really appreciated it. So she goes into the quarters and as Worf turns to leave, we hear this horrible blood curdling scream. And Worf tries to storm in to save her only to find that like security overrides have been done on the doors. Like he can't walk in. So he's got to do like some other security overrides to like open the door, runs into the room to find her cowering away from the window or away from the mirror, excuse me, going, oh my God, like it was my face, but it wasn't me on the inside. So she like empathically could tell that it wasn't like, how terrorizing would that be?
That's my God. Yeah. I wrote how scary because she said she feels like she's seeing her face, but a stranger is staring through it. So she felt like her face was a mask.
Oh my God, that's so scary.
Gosh, like that sounds like a horror movie right there. Your face is a mask on somebody else as you're looking in the mirror. That's terrifying. Totally terrifying.
It's totally terrifying. And I think that this is the boon of great writing, where none of us have that like beta Z empathic ability. And yet it is described in such a way that all of us get like the heebie-jeebies when we think about that being, you know, us in her position. And I was like, oh my God. So she's had this horrible time. So something is clearly going on with poor Troi. Oh my God. Worf is complaining that his wrist is hurting, goes to sickbay to find that it is broken. Like the mystery keeps deepening.
Yeah. Well, it was broken.
And it was reset.
And now it's hurting because the bones reset. And so it's just kind of like healing and the healing process or whatever. But Beverly's like, I'm pretty sure I didn't reset this in my sleep. And I have no recollection whatsoever of setting this wrist.
Exactly. So now, you know, I would say originally it was, we were unconscious for 30 seconds or for a whole day.
Right.
Now it's like, oh my God, there's a third option.
Right.
We were awake the whole day.
And unconscious for 30 seconds.
Yeah. And have no memory of that entire day.
Which is crazy, which is totally.
I would rather be unconscious for the whole day.
Yeah. And one of the things that Jordy asked Way in the beginning was, or maybe it was now, I don't remember when, but he says, if we were unconscious for the whole day, why didn't our beards grow? And I just kind of laughed at that because I was like, do beards grow that fast? Because I'm not a guy.
Not the same thing. I've never had a beard because, you know, I don't grow beards. So I was like, do they grow that fast?
Yeah. But I think it depends on the guy because some guys I know, they're like, yeah, I have to shave every single day. So I'm like, I guess if a whole day went by, because we were looking at the moths who were like super duper fast growing moths. So if people who are just like, you know, hairy dudes or women who grow hair on their face and there's a whole day, they would feel some stubble or something different. So then I was like, oh.
Yeah, I guess you get that 5 o'clock shadow.
Interesting. Yeah. So at this point, when it's like, wait, you were awake the whole day and you just don't have any memory of it. It's like, oh my gosh. So wait a minute. Did we shave before we went to sleep? I was a little bit stuck on that piece because I was like, how did they do this then? And then they reveal how at the end. But at this point, I was just like, they were awake the whole time.
Which is so scarier. Much more terrifying. That's so much more terrifying. Now, Geordi finds that the planet that Data found from the Troi system that like was the M-class planet that wasn't an M-class planet. And I saw it through the refraction of the light through the wormhole or whatever the fuck he said. It's actually not any planet from the Troi system. It's from Tethys 3. And it's been pulled from the ship's library and it's been airbrushed. You know, the nipples have been airbrushed off of it and he changed it up just a tiny bit and presenting it as this M-class planet. And
that's our first time saying nipples on the show. That was fun.
So one quick thing. I think Tethys is a wonderful name. And if I recall correctly, I'm a huge fan of Greek mythology. The dread Nereid Tethys was the warrior Achilles' mother, and she was a sea nymph who like all feared and revered. Wow. And so I was like, ooh, they're like pulling from this like human historical bank for these like kick-ass systems names. So I love it.
And
and
the planet was like a green blue, like oceany looking,
like an oceanic type of planet. Yeah. I was like, Tethys, you say? Ooh, okay. Yeah.
I see you.
Yes. I see you, Greek mythology. I see you, Achilles' mom. So Data is again called to Picard, and Picard's like, Data, come on, man.
Yeah, at this point, he's like, look, Troi is like losing it. We've got the Moss. We see that the chronometers aren't what they need to be. Beverly's proof we've been awake the whole day. We've got all of this data. We've got all of this information saying that you are not telling the truth. So just be honest and say what's up. And Data's just like he opens his mouth to answer and then he closes it. And then he opens his mouth and goes, I cannot say. And Picard's like, come on, Data. Like he's getting frustrated, which you almost never see. I think the last time I saw Picard get frustrated in like a peaceful conversation is when he was with the Shellyak. And he was just like, listen to me. And they were like, beep, beep, and beamed him immediately off their ship because they don't put up with that crap. So here he's talking to Data like, come on, just be honest. And Data's just like, I can't tell you anything. And then Picard says, you realize he actually does some kind of deductive reasoning. And he goes, what do you think's going to happen? Like, what am I going to have to do? What would you do in my position?
Yes. He said, what would you have me do, Data? What would you do if our positions were reversed? And I love this lack of ego. Like, what would you do?
Yeah. And Data's just like, well, based on all the evidence, it's clear what you should do, which is to court-martial him and to confine him to quarters and all this kind of stuff. And Picard says, do you realize that a court-martial would not only end your career, but also you would be stripped down to your wires until we found out what went wrong? And Data's just like, yes, I understand. And I was like, that hit me so hard in the feels because anyone else would be court-martialed and their reputation would be tarnished, but they probably, I don't know, they'd be fine. Right. But this would be the end of Data's existence. And I thought, that's not fair. Like,
no,
that's not fair.
No. And the fact that like, we know the conclusion to this story, we know why this is happening.
Yeah.
And that Data would be dismantled and he would let that happen to protect, the mystery was just heartbreaking, where I was like, oh, this is such dedication. Picard does order Geordi to send another probe. He's like, send another probe and I want you to analyze the findings. And Data, you're kind of like confined to quarters, sort of.
Yeah.
So Picard does understand
and Pinky promised that you won't break out with your super strength. Okay. And Data's like, I promise.
Code. Yeah. Fine. Yeah. Now, Picard does understand that Data's refusing to cooperate because he's acting in the best interest of the ship. So he's like, did Starfleet get in touch with you? What is happening? So I do love that at least Picard is like, I know you're acting in the best interest of the ship. So I value that and I respect that. And also, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with you, Data. Yeah. Now, this is when Beverly is like, wait a minute, we could have all been conscious this whole time because I sure as shit did not set Worf's broken wrist in my sleep. And the probe comes back and it really is an M-class planet. And Picard is like, all the pieces click for him. All of it. He's like, there's no wormhole. There never was a wormhole. Troi system warp 2 and off they go.
And they're kind of talking as a bridge crew on the bridge for a change. And they're kind of saying like, because usually they're in the observation lounge, but they're kind of talking and they're like, okay, so what do you think happened? And Beverly's like, well, the fact that we're still alive means maybe we won. Clearly there was some kind of conflict that happened at this planet and somehow we left the planet and our memory's gone, but we must have won because we're still alive. And then Riker goes, I think Picard goes, not necessarily. And Riker goes, maybe we should leave well enough alone. Maybe we didn't win, but we also didn't lose. Maybe it was a draw. And I think if we go back, we might just be stirring things up again. And maybe that could put us in danger. And Picard's like, that's true. We might be put in danger again. However, if we don't get to the bottom of this mystery, that will be the end of Data. And I am not willing to let that happen.
Yeah.
So we're going back. And it's like, oh, I'm so torn. Like, I definitely don't want Data dismantled. And also, if Data went to all these great lengths, it's probably for a really good reason.
Yes, it's absolutely for a good reason. And Picard is not willing to leave well enough alone, which I totally agree with you. As they approach the Troi system, this energy field approaches between the ship and that M-class planet that really is there. Mm-hmm. And they manage to sort of disperse this energy field, but it attaches itself to Troi, and she's woken up and taken over by this energy field. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh shit.
My actual thought was Troi got assaulted by a beam of light again.
Yes.
Like, that sucks.
Troi. Is it like occupational hazard for a beta set? I mean, what the hell?
That was horrible. But what was awesome was her voice modulation. I loved it.
Oh,
it was her same accent, but it was like, you have disobeyed or whatever. It just was so cool how they did that and made her have a scary voice. I like that.
Well, I have a little snippet of it that I'm going to play because it is really good. You can still hear Counselor Troi in it, but the way either she modulates her voice or post-production modulates it is fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. So she goes to see Data, now taken over by this energy field. And she says,
"The plan has failed."
And Data is like, do nothing. You're back. Do nothing. So he clearly knows who this being is. And it seems that destroying the ship it hangs in the balance.
Right.
So
I mean, basically this new energy light being is just like, the plan failed. The only option now is to destroy the entire Enterprise. And Data's like, wait. Let me try my gift of persuasion one more time. I think we can still get us out of here without mass loss of life. And surprisingly, the energy field is like down for that. Is like, all right, I'll give you about 3 minutes. And let's Data go to the bridge alone.
Minutes. Yes, absolutely.
3 Earth minutes. And let's Data go to the bridge. And then like 3 minutes later follows Data to the bridge.
So Data goes to the bridge alone because this energy being is like, I trust you know the way. I don't have to, I don't know, whatever. I don't have to follow you. So Data tries to warn Picard, like, we must leave now. But Picard is like, I'm not leaving without explanation. I want answers, right? He is being very pouty. I'm sorry, but if Data is like, we have to leave now, I'll explain later. I'd be like, warp 9, let's get the fuck out of here. Like,
totally.
There isn't time.
Totally.
Now,
and you can trust him because that energy field that's kind of hanging out outside of the ship suddenly attacks the ship. And Picard gives some order like, oh, raise shields or whatever. And Data's like, no, you must modulate the shields on a frequency of blah, 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 blah.
Modulate shield strength and frequency as quickly as you can. Yeah, I was like, uh-oh. So clearly Data's like, I know exactly what to do here because we've done it already. Yep. Get out of here, Picard. Like, let's go. Put your pedal to the metal and let's get out of here. Like, burn rubber and let's get out of here. And Picard's like, I want answers, right? He's getting very huffy and puffy about it. So Troi, as this alien being, comes onto the bridge. And finally, Data kind of looks at her and looks at Picard.
Did you see what happened when everyone realized that Troi was not Troi? The very first thing that happened was Worf tried to shoot her. And I was just like, nothing if not consistent, buddy.
No.
Nothing if not consistent.
Worf tried to shoot her immediately. And Picard's like, Worf, no. Which also, I feel like it's time to have a meeting with Worf and be like, you do not shoot a fucking phaser on my bridge, blasting holes in my walls and on my view screen and sucking us out into space. Don't do it.
So, or just keep it on stun, I guess is fine.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe stun. Why do you even have one? You barely have one for away missions, for crying out loud. Why do you have one on the bridge? I would have that little side pocket and I'd have like a banana in it for like if I wanted a snack or something.
Banana.
Yeah. Okay, so Data sees Troi and she looks at Picard and looks at Troi and he kind of calculates the weight of breaking this order or risking, against risking the destruction of the Enterprise.
Immediately.
Yes. And when Picard says, did someone order you to conceal this information? Who? And Data says, you did, sir. And we're like, oh my God, right? We just get blasted back in our seats. Now, as any good mystery, Shereese, we get a big reveal.
Woo! I love the big reveal. So and I love that they did it in a flashback. Because I wanted to see what the heck happened. Or I just wanted to hear what happened. But I really appreciate they went the extra mile and showed us what happened.
Totally. So here's the big reveal. There is an alien race that lives on this M-class planet called the Paxons. They're isolationists, and the wormhole was a trap to keep out invaders. It's an energy field that stuns everyone on board of an invading vessel, keeping them in biochemical stasis, thus no beard growth.
I was like, thanks for answering that question.
I know.
That I wouldn't have even had if Geordi hadn't said it.
Exactly. Because we would have been like, what beard? What? Anyway, so the Paxons then, while they're in biochemical stasis, take the ship out of their territory. So the crew wakes up and thinks they've been through a wormhole, considers themselves lucky to have survived, and then just go about their day. But Data's positronic brain wasn't affected by the stun field. So he was able, and this is our flashback, he was able to initiate emergency procedures to defend the ship, and then he's able to revive the crew. And the Paxons took over Troi's body to communicate with the crew. First thing Worf did was try to attack Troi, and because somebody needed to get their ass kicked on the bridge, Troi broke his wrist and sent him flying to like the bulkheads.
Nothing if not consistent.
He's trying to like judo chop her head off, like because of a question mark he has about her. Now, you know what I'd love to see is old Worf with like a walker and like a back brace for like all the, you know, when you get older, all those old injuries come back to like haunt you. Yeah. Lore kicking his ass and Troi kicking his ass and Q kicking his ass. Like now at this point, Picard tries to negotiate with the Paxons in the flashback, asking that the crew has its memory wiped in order to protect them from being discovered by others. And I call it Troi as Paxson. When Troi as Paxson says, it could work, but there's this exception of Data. It's not acceptable for the Paxons for outsiders to have any knowledge of their civilization.
And Picard was really genius right there because they were like, yeah, so we have to destroy you. And Picard was like, well, if you destroy us, the entire Federation is going to come looking for us, and everyone across the entire galaxy will know about your planet. And they were like, okay, what do you propose for a plan B? Yes. Like now they're open to discussion.
I do like that Troi as Paxson is like, no. It's like, well, then you may want to hold your horses for 1 second and like listen to our other plan. So you're right. Plan B is Picard says, what if I order Data to conceal all knowledge of you as long as he lives or as long as he exists? And they're like, that would be acceptable. Like, let's go about this plan. I did catch a continuity error though. When giving the order, Picard tells Data never to reveal the Paxons' existence, even though the name the Paxons hadn't been known yet. They had not identified themselves like, we are the Paxons and we don't want you here. It was just Troi being like, you can't be here. We must destroy you. And Picard was like, hey, Data, never tell anybody of the Paxons' existence ever. Got it? And it's like, how would you know that's what they're called? So I was like,
I missed that completely missed that because we as viewers already know that they're called the Paxons at this point.
Yes, we did know that. And so, you know, Troi as Paxson agrees, and that they, you know, end up kind of doing this whole, like, we'll wipe everybody's memory. We'll just be out, you know, for like 30 seconds.
So Picard pinky promises that this time it's for realsies going to work because they will leave no clues at all.
Because the clues are like irresistible to humans.
And I was like, is that true? I don't know if that's true, but I will say mysteries are interesting. And it definitely got my attention to follow along through this whole episode.
Yes.
And I also thought, how'd they miss this? But I guess they didn't think about it. They just thought, turn back the clocks, you know, whatever. And the other thing I thought, which is just, I don't know why, but this keeps coming into my head, is when they wake up, there's like a whole bunch of injuries because people were in the middle of doing stuff when they passed out. Yeah. And I thought to myself, if they knew that they were going to pass out, why didn't they just sit down? But then I thought to myself, but if they all sat down and then they woke up and they were sitting down, like all the people in the back of the bridge that don't have chairs, right? If they were like sitting down and the 30 seconds was up and then they were like, wake up, but they're sitting, which they normally never sit. I thought that could also
see, I thought this is the time for a bosun's whistle to be like, everybody, we're going to have our memories wiped for 30 seconds. So pick a position to slump over a chair or the bridge or lie on the floor or something.
There's really no need for injuries. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no need for injuries.
It does lend credence to the idea that we were going about our business and suddenly attacked by a wormhole that made us all fall over. So I was like, well, I mean, that would make more sense. And maybe everyone being super safe and sitting down at the exact moment would seem a little sus. So so that's what I was thinking. Like, why did nobody had to hit their heads? We didn't have to do that.
Yes.
But I guess we did.
Yeah. Troi as Paxton did say, like, look, we tried this, the ship must be destroyed. He's like, wait a minute. We left these clues. If we could clear up the clues, this would be not a problem. So let's get Worf some like tiger balm for his wrist or whatever. So that's not hurting anymore, and have everybody sitting down or lying down in ways that like isn't going to cause massive injuries. Beverly, go ahead and start your spores like right before you lie down on the ground in front of the spores. Like everything, there needs to be nothing for us to pick up on. And the Paxons allows this second run through the plan, because really what's the alternative? They destroy the Enterprise and the entire Starfleet ends up showing up at their door to find out what happened to their flagship. And so they're like, fine. So it cuts to an unconscious Picard coming around along with the rest of the crew. And Data's like, you were unconscious for about 30 seconds. And this time it works. And off they go. And really, it's like, awesome. You know, they want to investigate the M-class planet. Data's like, why don't we just send a probe instead? So it seems almost like a temporal loop where they're caught and destined to repeat the same thing, which is another episode that we're going to review later.
That we love.
Also one of my favorites. I won't say that for every episode, I promise. But this time it actually works. It works, and off they go. And I'm so thrilled that I was like, holding my breath for a split second where I was like,
is he going to go back? Is he going to believe the data from the probe? And he does look at him kind of sideways for a minute. And then he goes, yeah, that's fine. Okay, let's go. And Data's just like, phew.
I think that is Sir Patrick Stewart excellently acting that moment, because for a split second, he seems to recognize something. And I was like, does he remember what happened? But then he's like, yeah, that's fine. Just go ahead and send that probe. And like, off we go to like Calvados 2 or whatever. And you're like, okay. And I was like, did Picard actually remember? Or did he just like,
or did something seem fishy? And he was just picking up on clues again. I love the fact that this episode ends exactly where it started. I mean, a little, you know, it ends right before the commercial break, basically. And I love that. I love just that circle of life thing going on here, because it's just a beautiful way to end the episode. And I also was like, uh-oh, I hope they don't go back, because this would be horrible. I feel like the Paxtons would be like, at this point, we just got to destroy you. We'll destroy you and then move the pieces of the ship somewhere else. You know, like,
which the Paxtons seem like they could totally do, because if they're moving ships in biochemical stasis, they can certainly move pieces of ships. You know, so that wouldn't be that hard. All right. So that's where the episode ends off on a really great note. Thank God. What are your final thoughts on this episode, Shereese?
My only final thought was like, man, I wish there was a way for me to use one of these memory wipes just for this episode, or use like one of the Men in Black little like doop doop red light things just for the episode, because I want to feel the confusion / excitement of going through this mystery and having it unfold. Because I already know how it ends, every single scene I was like, ooh, there's a clue. Ooh, there's a clue. Like I was, you know, I knew what was coming, and it was a great episode. And I think if there was any way that I could relive this episode as if it was the first time, it would be really magical. That was really my final thought. What about you?
That would be really, really fun. I would love that as well. I mean, I feel like I would love a memory wipe tool for like a bunch of things that I have experienced in my life or am experiencing in my life that I would really rather
That's
not,
true.
You know, so it's like, well, I'd love to have that. But if we're talking about just for the sake of this episode, yeah, why not? Wouldn't that be fun to like get to watch this for the first time again? I don't remember the first time I watched it. And I do remember that this is one that like I love watching over and over again. I really, really do. Thanks, Netflix, the ability to just scroll through every episode and pick the ones I want. I mean, really, when I do like want to fall asleep at night, I sort of cycle through several episodes. When I go to bed at night, I cycle through a couple of different shows like The Office, Arrested Development, Frasier, Golden Girls, and Star Trek TNG, which is a very varied mix of shows. But the great thing about Netflix is you can scroll through and pick whichever episode you want. And really, there's like 10 TNG episodes I keep coming back to, and Remember Me is one of them, and this is another one. And it's just delicious from start to finish. It's so great. It's a bottle show, but it's done beautifully. It stands the test of time, and it's just as great as I remember it.
100%.
All right. Well, I feel like we can now leave the M-Class planet without ourselves getting destroyed. So next week, we are talking season 4, episode 15, First Contact. Thank you guys so much for listening to us. We love you. We will see you guys next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at the TNGpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.